Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing a 52-week challenge, which technically it's a year challenge, one of those 2018 reading challenge things, but I didn't start even looking at it until May, and then I only just figured out which books I want to read for all of them last week. It's taken a while, so I decided that I was just going to see how many of these books I can read in the second half of 2018. I've already read 60 books, so I'm not terribly concerned about reading another 50. At any rate, each of these challenges, and there's 52, one for each week, is something different, meant to get you a little bit out of your comfort zone, or read some books. Well, realistically, it's just to get you to read. So I'm going to tell you which books I would like to read for each of these challenges. The first one is a book by a Canadian author, and for that one I want to read 3-Day Road by Joseph Boyden. It's been a while since I looked at the synopsis, but this one I think had to do with First Nations, and a young man travels somewhere, but I don't remember why. It sounded really good, and I don't necessarily know a lot of Canadian authors except for the lady who wrote Anne of Green Gables, which I've already read and don't really want to reread right now. Number 2 is read a childhood favorite, and for that one I went with The Enchanted Forest Chronicles, which technically I've already read all 4 of. So I'm gonna count it because it's just to read them, all these challenges, sometime this year. Which means this challenge is done because I love these books. Cimarine is a princess who doesn't act at all like her family thinks a princess should act. She learns that they're gonna marry her off, so she runs away and apprentices herself to a dragon. Go from there because it's fantastic. Number 3 is a novel that's considered a classic, and for this one I went with White Fang by Jack London. I loved this book as a kid as well, and I thought it would be kind of fun to reread it because I've been wanting to reread it for a while, but I haven't gotten around to it yet, so if I put it on a list, it might actually happen. Number 4 is a mystery novel, and for that I went with White Plague by an author I can't remember. I bought this at Sweet Pea up on the North Shore of Minnesota a couple of months back when I was up there visiting my aunt and uncle, and it sounded really good. It's a modern day mystery, which I don't usually like, but there aren't also a lot of mysteries set in Elizabethan England, so I have to fudge with my tastes there. Next one is a book you've been meaning to read but haven't gotten to yet, and for that one I'm definitely going with Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, and I own the first 2, but they're very long, and if they were not so long and heavy I would have read them this summer, except that, again, bar. So instead they're gonna have to wait, and I will get to them when I get them. Although, as a side note, basically any book on my shelves could be a book that I've been meaning to read but haven't yet. Next is a science fiction novel, and I've been told to read Dune several times. I want to say the author's name is Frank something. Don't remember, but at any rate, I don't even know what this one's about. I just know it's science fiction, sort of the classic science fiction, and I've been told I would probably enjoy it, so I would like to read that. The next one is an adventure or espionage novel, and I don't really know any of those. White Plague might fit the description, in which case I'll go and find the new mystery one. Maybe something by C.J. Sansom. Now that I think about it, he has a lot of murder mysteries set in Elizabethan times. But as far as the espionage goes, I don't really know if I have a book. For a biography, which is the next one, I chose On Leopard Rock by Wilbur Smith. He is one of my favorite authors. He wrote Pharaoh, Desert God, River God, and the entire Courtney series, all of which I love. So I'm really excited to see the man behind those stories. Next, there is a book that challenges your viewpoint, and for that one I am going with another classic, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. I can't remember if this one or The Octopus deals with the meatpacking industry, but one of them deals with the meatpacking industry, I think, and one of them deals with the railroad. I do eventually want to read them both, so I guess I could use both of them for this challenge. Then there is the first book in a trilogy, and I'm going with the first book in the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I've read Six of Crows, I haven't read Crooked Kingdom, and I haven't read any of the Grisha trilogy. Own them all though, so I should probably get on that. Then there is a book that's over 600 pages, which again, take your pick from among my books. Many of them are over 600 pages, but I'm thinking I will do Dragonfly and Amber by Diana Gabaldon, which is the second in the Outlander series, Time Traveling in Scotland. The next one is a book you can read in a day, and I went with The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is a YA retelling of the 1001 Nights. I have the original 1001 Nights in that Barnes & Noble collectible edition, but I haven't read that either, and this is a retelling, it's YA, so it won't take me very long, and I've heard mixed reviews on it, so I'm interested. Next one is a book that's won a Pulitzer Prize, and for this I went with The Underground Railroad. Katie, my friend who was in Nicaragua, was telling me that this book is amazing and that I would probably really enjoy it. So since it's won a Pulitzer Prize, and I recognized the title, I went with that one for the Pulitzer Prize. Next is any book from the 2017 Goodreads Awards, and I went with The Women in the Castle. I want to say this is World War II, fairly certain it's World War II, couldn't tell you where, somewhere in Europe, and it sounded really interesting, so as soon as I get on that. Next is a book that's been made into a movie, and for this I can either go with Crazy Rich Asians, which is coming out later this year in movie form and I have the book to read, or Everything Everything, which came out last November, I think, and I didn't read the book because I didn't know it was a book, but I now own the book, so I should go back and read the book. I just haven't yet. Next is a book that was chosen solely because of its cover. There are so many of them on my shelves because I have a problem, but there's one by Alison Pataki and Owen Pataki, and I'm not going to find this book right now because that would take far too long. That is absolutely stunning and set in the French Revolution. It's got a sort of an arched window, and then you look out onto a bridge with a river underneath it. Lovely, lovely book. And then there is a book on theology, and for this one I am including, or counting rather, the one that I'm currently reading by Calvin, which is Institutes of the Christian Religion. I'm including this one because I don't really read a lot of theology, but this one is also very large. It's, I want to say 900 pages, and it's going to take me a while, but I am enjoying what I'm reading of it so far, so I'm excited to finish that. The next one is a celebrity memoir, and so for this I went with Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, which is set in South Africa, and I have a very healthy, I guess, obsession with South Africa, having been there, so anything that's set there intrigues me. A book with a 6-word title I went with At the Mercy of the Queen. It's set somewhere between the 1400s and the 1600s, and that's about all I remember. A book that makes me laugh out loud, I went with Cry of the Ice Mark, which will be another reread for me, but love this book. Absolutely adore it. My sister ended up giving it to me for some holiday when we were younger because I kept borrowing her copy and I was reading it significantly more than she was, so she gave it to me. Then I have a book you read in school, and for this I'm going with, tentatively anyway, a House on Hackman's Hill. This book gave me nightmares for a week when I was a kid, and now that I'm older I would like to reread it and see if it's still as scary as it was then. We're gonna find out. Then is a book with a green spine, and for that I'm going with Firebird by Mercedes Lackey. To be honest, it was the first book with a green spine that struck me when I looked at my bookshelves. Next is a book with a character that shares your name. My name is spelled very strangely, at least in the States, and the only book I found that was even remotely interesting had a guy with my name. So I might read Snow Angel, I might not. We will see. A book that was published in 2018, I'm going with The Burning Maze by Rick Riordan, which is the third in the Trials of Apollo series. A book recommended by a friend. I'm fairly certain many of these have been recommended by a friend at some point, or I'm gonna fudge it a little bit and go with the Reckoners series, which was recommended to me by one of my cousins. Book recommended by a librarian, again, fudging it a little bit, but it's Ireland by Edward Rutherford. I met this woman several years ago who recommended him very highly when she saw the books I was carrying, and so I got it, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm working on it. A book written by an author under 30. For this one I went with Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Her book Americana is really big, but I don't own that one. I own the other one that I bought in South Africa. So I'm excited to read this 2 years later. A book written before 1920, I went with The Three Musketeers because that's on my list. I have a really beautiful copy and I've read The Count of Monte Cristo, but I haven't read The Three Musketeers yet. Book that makes you cry, I thought maybe I'd reread Burning Brightly because if you've been with me a little bit, then you know that maybe 2 or 3 books have ever made me cry. An ebook, I recently got Essex Serpent on ebook/audiobook, so I will be listening to that one maybe when I drive to Minnesota for the bar. Super fun. A book with bad reviews, I went with The Pleasures of Men. It took me a lot to figure out which books actually had bad reviews as opposed to like 3.5 reviews, because that's not a bad review, but this book I think had 1.5 stars. So I'm interested to see. A young adult bestseller, I think I might go with Ember in the Ashes because that one is getting a lot of hype right now with the third book coming out and it just sounds very intriguing to me, set in basically a fantasy Rome. Book set in Africa, I went with Pharaoh by Wilbur Smith. Ancient Egypt, there's some mystical elements in it and I really enjoy his writing. A book by Agatha Christie, I went with Labors of Hercules because I was intrigued by the title. A historical nonfiction book, I went with Without Precedent by Chief Justice John Marshall. I wanted to read something that had a little bit more legal significance. A book that inspires you, I went with the biography of Elizabeth I by Alison Weir. Elizabeth I, do I need to say more? A short story, again I'm fudging this a bit because I don't know a lot of short stories. So I'm going to say that I will read Leigh Bardugo's collection of fairy tales from the Grishaverse. Next is a book that's been on the New York Times bestseller for more than 10 weeks. And I went with Just Mercy for this one. I don't remember what this one is about either. To be very honest, when I was looking up a lot of these books, I was a little bit brain dead from having studied for so long. So forgive me if I don't have the synopses. The next one is a political book and I went with The Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama, which I do own. I got it used somewhere and it should be interesting to read. A book by a Scandinavian author, I went with A Man Called Ova by Fredrik Backman. It's been recommended to me by my family and it's gotten a lot of hype on BookTube, so I'm excited to read it and see how it is. A book with non-human characters. There are many books on my shelves that have non-human characters, but I've been craving another reread and so I went with The Black Griffin by Mercedes Lackey. It is the first trilogy in her Valdemar series, and the main characters are griffins. A book about a topic you're passionate about. If you haven't figured it out already, I will read one of my books about Elizabeth I because I'm beyond passionate about Elizabeth I and anything that has to do with her is just amazing to me. A book set in the Middle East, I'm going with Whirlwind by James Clavell. It's the 6th in his series that started with Shogun, and I've read the first 5. The first 3 were the best, but I figure I should maybe finally finish the series and read Whirlwind. A book already on my bookshelves, I went with Sex with Kings, which was given to me by one of my friends for my birthday, and it just sounds really interesting. It's about kings and their mistresses. A book that was once banned, I went with The Decameron by Boccaccio, which I own in like an old edition, leather kind of looking cover, and this one was banned because it is apparently obscene. I'm guessing obscene like the Canterbury Tales obscene, which really isn't. But in the US you couldn't mail obscene things, and so it was banned in the US because they couldn't post it through the mail, which I just found hysterical. A book originally published in the year you were born, which is 92, so I went with The Pelican Brief by John Grisham. I believe I own this, and if I don't own it, my dad owns it. So somewhere along the way, I will read that as soon as I find it among all my books. A book about travel, I went with The Blue Horizon. It is one of the Courtney series by Wilbur Smith, and they are traveling all over between England and Africa, and all over Africa. I think they even stop in India at one point, so it's definitely about travel. A foreign book translated into English, I went with Romance of the Rose, which I want to say was 13th century poetry, basically, about chivalry and all that fun stuff, and I own a copy, so I figured I should maybe read it. A book with the letter Y somewhere in the title, I went with By Slanderous Tongue by Mercedes Lackey. The Y is in the by the way. This one was hard because there's not a lot of Y's in my titles, but I have been wanting to read this one because guess what? It's set in Elizabeth's time. Shocker, I know. But it follows her in this fantasy world with fairies, as she, I think she's queen at that point, or about to become queen. I'm very interested. A book with food on the cover, I went with Salt, A World History, because it's nonfiction and I think that sounds really interesting, actually, figuring out how salt has sort of changed the world. And the last one, number 52, is a book about a current world issue, and I went with In Order to Live. So those are the 52 books that I want to do for the 52-week challenge, which I am compressing into, 26 weeks or whatever. But at any rate, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up down below, and if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button down below. I will leave my Goodreads linked in the down bar if you want to check out what I read, but until my next video, bye.